Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop your answers and any suggestions in the comments, and I might give you a shout out at the end of my next video. Thanks for being here and for all your amazing support.
They say memory dulls with time, that the edges of guilt eventually blur, that the screams in your head soften into something like silence. They lied. 15 years ago, there was a farmhouse on Chile Avenue, a rotting skeleton of wood and rust that kids whispered about but never dared to enter, except us, me and Hannah. Back then, she was all fire and fascination, the kind of girl who could make danger sound like fun. Her laugh was magnetic, her eyes a kind of dare. I used to follow her everywhere, like a shadow that hadn't learned it could choose where to fall. Until that night. The night we left him down there. I hadn't thought about the farmhouse in years. Not since I moved to Rochester, became a nurse's aide, learned how to live quietly. Small apartment, same routine, no surprises. That's how I liked it. That's how I stayed sane. Then one Thursday night, I got the message. It was just one line. Same place, no name, no number I recognized, but I knew. Only one person ever said it like that. Hannah. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to delete the text, but my hands froze. I could almost hear her voice, half mocking, half sweet, like she never aged, like she never left that goddamn house. By midnight, I was driving down Chile Avenue again. The road hadn't changed much. Still cracked, still lined with dead cornfields. The air smelled like rain and rot. I parked across from where the farmhouse used to stand, though I half hoped it'd be gone. But it was there, leaning sideways, like the earth itself was tired of holding it up. The windows were broken eyes, the porch a spine of splinters. She was waiting by the gate. Hannah? She turned, smiling. Same red hair, same freckled cheeks, same wicked little smirk. Only, she hadn't changed. Not at all. God, Han, I whispered, you look exactly the same. Her smile widened. So do you. That wasn't true. I'd aged 15 years. She hadn't aged a second. I wanted to leave then, to turn and run back to my car, but something in her voice held me there, like gravity itself had shifted around her. Let's go inside, she said. We never finished what we started. The floorboards moaned under our steps. Dust floated through the beam of my flashlight like falling ash. Every corner stank of mildew and something deeper, something sour. Do you remember the sound? Hannah whispered. I tried not to. The sound from the cellar, that thin, reedy scream that had haunted my dreams for years. There was no sound, I lied. It was just a story. Her hand brushed mine, cold as marble. You know that's not true. Something moved upstairs, a dragging sound, slow and uneven. I froze. What was that? She smiled. Just him. I turned sharply. Hannah, stop. Why? You used to love our games. Her voice changed, layered somehow, like two people speaking at once. The flashlight flickered. When it came back on, she was closer. Her pupils had swallowed her irises. He's been waiting for you, she whispered. I stumbled back, tripping on a loose plank. The beam of light shot toward the stairs. For a split second, I saw feet, small, bare, gray, standing at the top of the staircase. When I looked again, they were gone. I backed toward the door. I'm leaving. She didn't move to stop me. She just tilted her head. Leaving him again? My throat tightened. That wasn't my fault. We were kids. Her smile cracked wider than human lips should stretch. We were everything to him. The sound came again, this time behind me. A soft laugh. Childish. Wet. I ran. The night air hit me like ice, but it didn't help. I drove home faster than I should have, glancing at the rearview every second fuse. She was there, once, for just a moment. Her reflection sitting calmly in the back seat, eyes forward, smiling. By the time I reached my apartment, I was shaking. I locked every door, turned every light on. I kept telling myself it wasn't real. That trauma makes you see things that aren't there. But when I went to bed, there were muddy footprints on the carpet, from the front door to my bedside, and my phone screen was on. A message was being typed by invisible hands. Stay, stay, stay. The next 3 nights were worse. The TV would flicker on at 3:14 a.m., always that same minute, showing only static and faint whispers underneath. The smell of wet dirt filled the room. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of breathing under the bed. Then came the voice, my mother's. She'd been dead 8 years. Han, come downstairs. It's time to clean up your mess. I hid under the covers like a child, but the smell of rot was stronger under there. That's when I knew. I had to go back. The farmhouse was waiting for me. So was Hannah. She was standing on the porch, humming that same lullaby from when we were kids, the one about the little boy lost in the cellar. Her eyes met mine. You came back. I have to end this. You can't end what you never admitted. You forgot him, but he didn't forget you. The cellar door groaned open before she even touched it. The smell was unbearable, a mixture of rust, earth, and something sweetly rotten. I don't want to go down there. Her fingers closed around my wrist, cold, strong, inhumanly strong. Then she dragged me toward the stairs. The light from above faded quickly until there was nothing but blackness and wet drip of unseen water. Each step felt softer than the last, like the wood itself was sinking. When we reached the bottom, the darkness felt alive. It breathed. Where is he? I whispered. Right where you left him? I turned the flashlight on. The beam caught the far wall, and there, half buried in the dirt, was a shape. Small, human. Its head lifted. The skin was gray and torn, hair matted to its skull. One eye was missing. The other stared right at me. And then it screamed. Not a child's scream, but something ancient, animal, deafening. The air shook. My knees buckled. I felt his hand close around my ankle, slick and cold. Let me out, it gurgled. You promised you'd come back. I screamed, too, kicked, clawed at Hannah's grip. But she was smiling, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Stay. He just wants you to stay. I tore free, scrambled up the stairs. The air grew heavier the higher I climbed, like invisible hands were pulling me down. When I burst through the door, the night was gone. No stars, no road, just endless empty fields. Behind me, the cellar door slammed shut. I woke up 2 days later. On my couch, the TV still on static, my phone cracked on the floor. There were photos scattered everywhere. Photos of me, sleeping, eating, working. In every single one, Hannah was lying beside me, sometimes smiling, sometimes watching. The last one made my blood freeze. It wasn't Hannah in that final photo. It was me, but not me. My mouth stretched into that same unnatural grin she had in the cellar. When I looked into the mirror across the room, I saw that grin again. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was his, that long guttural scream from the cellar, echoing out of my throat. And behind it, faintly, Hannah's voice, gentle and triumphant. We're all together again, Han. The mirrors cracked now.
The footprints never wash away. Sometimes I still smell the dirt when I wake up. Sometimes I hear that boy laughing from under the floorboards. And sometimes, when I look in the reflection, I see Hannah standing behind me, smiling, waiting, and I know one day soon she'll call again.
When it rains too hard for too long, the earth remembers. It softens, surrenders, and swallows what it's owed. I think about that every time a storm rolls in, every time thunder rattles my windows. Because somewhere out there, beneath a collapsed cabin and 15 feet of dirt, Margot Davies is still waiting for me. Back then I was 16, a quiet, cautious girl working as a junior counselor at Camp Ridgeway. All wooden cabins, mosquito bites, and songs around a fire. Margot was my opposite in every way. Where I hesitated, she dared. Where I worried, she laughed. She called me Ellie the Safety Queen. I called her Trouble. That summer, trouble felt like oxygen until the night it rained. The storm hit just past midnight. I remember the roar, water hammering the roof, thunder cracking so close it shook my bed. Margot and I were assigned to cabin 8, the farthest one near the river gorge. When the ground trembled, I thought it was thunder again. But then the sound changed, deeper, slower, like the earth was groaning. I sat up. Margot was already at the window. "Ellie," she whispered, "the trees are moving." A second later, the hill above us gave way. I didn't even have time to scream. I woke up in the dark. The cabin had folded in on itself, beams and splintered boards pressing down on everything. Rain still fell through holes in the roof. I could taste mud in my mouth. "Margot?" A weak voice answered from somewhere nearby. "Over here." I crawled toward it, my hands shaking. My flashlight flickered on and caught her under a beam. Her legs were pinned. "Can you move?" I asked. "Not yet." She tried to smile, but her face twisted with pain. "Go get help, Ellie. Go." "I'll get the beam off you." "Ellie, no," she snapped. "The ground's still moving. Just go." I hesitated, but only for a second. The sound outside was terrifying. Trees collapsing, water roaring down the hill. I told her I'd come back. I ran. By the time rescue arrived hours later, cabin 8 was gone. No trace, just mud, broken boards, and the river running brown. They never found Margot. For 19 years, I told myself I did the right thing, that running for help was the smart choice. But guilt doesn't wash off that easily. It just hides, like silt, settling at the bottom of a riverbed. You think it's gone, until something stirs it up again. The first postcard arrived on a Tuesday. It was old, yellowed, the edges soft from moisture. A faded photograph of Camp Ridgeway printed on the front. The same cabins, same pine trees. No return address. On the back, written in looping cursive I'd recognize anywhere. "Still hear the mud." My hands shook so badly I dropped it. When I picked it up again, the ink was smudged. The word mud looked more like me. By the end of the week, 3 more postcards came, each one with the same photo, each one in Margot's handwriting. "The rain hasn't stopped. I'm still under it. You owe me a hand, Ellie." I stopped opening the mail, but every night the smell of wet earth filled my apartment. And then the silt started appearing. At first it was a light dusting, on the windowsill, on the floor near the door. I vacuumed, scrubbed, even replaced the doormat. But every morning it was back, damp, fine, almost warm. By the third night, it covered the floor. My shoes left prints in it. That's when I started hearing the sound, faint and rhythmic, like wood creaking under weight. And then the rush of distant water, always from inside the walls. I told myself it was stress, PTSD. I even called a therapist. She said maybe writing a letter to Margot would help me process. I tried, but the words wouldn't come. All I could write was, I tried. That night, I woke up choking. My throat was full of dirt. I ran to the sink gagging, mud spilled from my mouth thick and black. When I looked up, there was a handprint on the mirror, wet, dripping, and too small to be mine. By Friday, the mud reached my ankles. It spread from the kitchen to the living room, heavy and wet like something alive. When I stepped into it, it clung to my legs, pulling, almost pulsing. I tried to leave. The door wouldn't open. The handle turned but refused to release. Behind me, the creaking sound grew louder. And then I saw her. Margot. She was standing by the light hallway, caked head to toe in wet black soil. Her hair hung in muddy ropes. Her eyes were cloudy, but she was smiling. "Hi, Safety Queen." My knees nearly gave out. "You're dead." "Am I?" Her head tilted. The light flickered. Water began dripping from the ceiling, landing in slow, heavy splats. "Why are you here?" I whispered. Her grin widened. "You said you'd come back." I backed away, slipping in the mud. She moved closer, slow, steady, her feet sinking into the floor with each step. "I waited, Ellie," she whispered. "It got dark down there, cold, but I could still hear you." She took another step. Her voice was soft but full of rage. "You ran for help, but you didn't come back, did you?" "I tried." "You didn't." Her eyes were no longer eyes, just black hollows dripping with water. "I screamed until the earth filled my mouth," she said. "You should have stayed." I turned to run toward the back door, but the floor collapsed beneath me. I landed hard, knee-deep in sludge. The mud was warm now, breathing. Margot knelt beside me, her hands coated in black ooze. She reached for me. "You owe me a hand." She fingered my wrist. The grip was iron. "Let go!" I screamed. "Help me out, Ellie!" She pulled. The mud pulled with her. I clawed at the floorboards, my nails tearing. But the suction was too strong. I felt it crawling up my chest, into my mouth, filling my nose, my ears. Through the blur, I saw her face close to mine, smiling faintly, eyes soft again. "It's okay," she whispered. "You'll get it right this time." When I woke up, it was daylight. My apartment was spotless, dry, silent. I thought I'd dreamed it until I saw my feet, mud under the nails. I ran to the bathroom to wash them, but when I turned on the faucet, nothing came out but brown water. It stank of soil and rot. And on the bathroom mirror, written in the steam, "Thank you for coming back." I moved out that night. I didn't take anything with me except my car keys and the clothes I was wearing. The next day the landlord called, said my old apartment had flooded overnight. The floor was coated in 2 feet of mud. No broken pipes, no rainstorm, just mud. They never found the source. I tried to start over again, in a smaller town, far from rivers, far from hills. But sometimes I still wake up to the sound of creaking wood. Sometimes I find silt under my fingernails, even though I haven't left the house. And last night, I got a postcard. It was blank, except for one wet fingerprint in the corner. When I held it under the light, Faint letters rose from the paper, written in what looked like mud. Still, under it. The thing about guilt is it never really dies. It just waits for the next storm. And when the rain starts again, when the ground starts to soften, I swear I hear her voice under the thunder, laughing, calling my name. And sometimes I almost answer.
There are places that never leave you. No matter how far you move, how old you get, how carefully you build your new life, some places wait. For me, that place was the Quarry. Back when I was 17, Fairview, Pennsylvania, was the kind of town that smelled like rust and gasoline. Bored kids did stupid things, and the Quarry was where we did them. It was deep, wide, and forbidden, fenced off after 2 drownings and a bad fall. But that summer, Noah wanted to go anyway. And whatever Noah wanted, I followed. He was magnetic like that, reckless, charming, impossible to refuse. Jesse was with us too, a younger boy who tagged along because he worshipped Noah the way I once did. We drank, we laughed, we dared each other to climb the fence. Then Jesse slipped. There was a scream, a splash, and then only ripples on the water. Noah froze. I froze. We both ran. And we never talked about it again. That was 15 years ago. My name's Eliza Harper now, 32, paralegal, neat little life. Coffee at 8, work by 9, home by 6. I live in a tidy apartment where everything has its place. I built this life to forget. And I thought I had, until I got a message last week. Meet me at the Quarry. It's time. No name, no number I knew. But I didn't have to ask. I knew that voice, even through text. Noah. The Quarry had been filled halfway for safety years ago, but when I drove out there, it looked almost the same. Dead trees, rusted chain link fence, still air. Only the silence felt heavier. He was waiting by the fence, hands in his pockets. At first, I almost smiled. Same messy hair, same grin. Then he moved, and something about that movement was wrong. Too sharp, too sudden, like he wasn't used to having bones. Eliza, he said softly, the words stuttering slightly, like a bad recording. You came? Of course I did. It's been years. What's this about? He smiled wider. You remember the water? My stomach dropped. Noah, don't start this. It was an accident. Accident, he repeated. That's what we called it, right? Even when he screamed for help. I took a step back. The smell of stagnant water hit me like a slap. Sour, metallic, almost alive. Jesse's gone, I whispered. There's nothing here. He tilted his head. Then why are we here, Eliza? His breath smelled like decay. I turned and left. I didn't look back. By the time I got home, my nerves were shredded. I locked the door, poured myself wine, and convinced myself it was just guilt playing tricks. Then, the next morning, I found the first Polaroid. It was sitting on my kitchen counter. A picture of me asleep in bed. And in the background, by the doorway, was a dripping gray figure. His face was waterlogged, his mouth open as if mid-scream. Jesse. By that night, more Polaroids appeared. On my bathroom mirror, on the front door, even in my purse. Each one showed Jesse standing closer. The air in my apartment grew damp. The walls darkened with moisture. My paperwork curled at the edges. I called Noah. His number was disconnected. I tried to burn one of the Polaroids, but it didn't burn. It only bubbled like wet skin blistering under heat. And then the water stains started to spread. At first, just on the ceiling above my bed, then across the walls, then under my feet. The floorboards warped with humidity. My rug was soaked through. But there was no leak. The following night, the copier at work started printing on its own. Blank pages filled with Jesse's face, blurry, gray, staring straight at me. The machine jammed. When I opened the tray, it was full of mud. That's when I knew it wasn't just haunting me, it was spreading. By the time I got home, my apartment smelled like the quarry, stagnant, rotten, wet. I found another Polaroid on my pillow. This one showed me at my desk at work. Behind me, Noah's reflection in the window. Only his eyes weren't eyes anymore, just black pits. And on the back of the photo, someone had written in wet ink, "If one of us came back, the other must follow." I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the quarry, the sound of water dripping, the echo of Jesse's voice calling my name. Then one night, I woke up to find my apartment floor covered in 2 inches of water. I stepped into it barefoot. It was freezing. The lights flickered and my reflection rippled in the surface. Only it wasn't just me. There were 2 reflections standing beside me. Noah and Jesse. Their mouths were moving. I leaned closer. They were whispering something over and over. "We never left." The lights went out. The water surged up my legs. I felt it climb to my waist, my chest, my throat. It was so cold it burned. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear Jesse's voice, faint and childlike. "You said we'd be friends forever." Then his hand closed over my mouth, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was on my couch. My apartment was bone dry, no water stains, no Polaroids. For a second, I thought it was over. But when I stood up, I heard the sound. Drip, drip, drip. I followed it to the kitchen sink. The faucet was dry. The sound was coming from the ceiling. A drop hit my forehead. It smelled like the quarry. I looked up. A single Polaroid was taped to the ceiling above me. It showed me lying dead on my couch, eyes open, mouth full of water. In the corner, Jesse and Noah stood side by side, smiling. And on the bottom edge, written in smeared blue ink, "Now you remember." They found my apartment 3 days later. The floor was warped and buckled from water damage, but the source was never found. All the Polaroids were gone, except one. The one showing the quarry. Still, dark, silent. If you look closely, you can see 3 figures standing at the edge. They look calm, almost peaceful. Almost.
Some nights, the city hums just loud enough to drown out the past. Other nights, when the world is still, I can hear them again. The voices, calling from the bridge. My name is Mara Hayes. I live alone in a small apartment on the edge of Philadelphia, one of those narrow brick buildings where you can hear your neighbors sneeze through the walls. I work in records management, filing, cataloging, forgetting. That last part, I used to think, was my specialty. Then, Daniel called. It was 12:47 a.m. My phone vibrated once, twice, then stopped. When I looked at the screen, my blood ran cold. Unknown number. Voicemail received. I pressed play. The voice was warped, full of static, but I knew it instantly. "Meet me where it ended," it said. And then, faintly, laughter. I hadn't heard that voice in 15 years. Not since the summer Daniel fell. We were kids back then, reckless, half-drunk on youth and the illusion of invincibility. The bridge was our dare spot, an old railway crossing above the river, long abandoned, narrow as a tightrope. Daniel was fearless. I wasn't. He made me follow him halfway across the tracks that night. The river below looked black, endless. I remember the sound, the creak of iron, the distant rush of water. Then he slipped. For a second, I thought he'd catch my hand. He reached up. And I pulled back. Fear froze me. I just watched him fall. I told everyone I never saw what happened. They said it was an accident. I let them believe that. But Daniel never left that river. Not for me. I tried to sleep after the voicemail. I really did. But at 3:11 a.m., the phone rang again. I didn't answer. Instead, I heard the ring echo. Not through the air, but through the floorboards, like it was coming from under me. The next morning, the smell hit me first. Rust and river water. My hallway light flickered. I thought it was the wiring, until I saw the shadow. A silhouette in the reflection of the window, standing behind me, still, head slightly tilted. When I turned, no one was there. The next day, at work, it followed me. Not the figure, the smell. I could taste it, metallic, sour, like wet pennies on my tongue. Every file I touched felt damp. Every cabinet creaked like old iron. Then I started seeing them. At first just Daniel, in the corner of my eye, behind glass, reflected in monitors. Then others. Jenny Clark. She drowned senior year. Chris Hall. Car crash. David Burke. House fire. All classmates. All dead. Each one staring. Each one silent. By the third day, the silence broke. It happened in the subway. I was on my way home when the lights flickered. The train slowed, then stopped. In the reflection of the window opposite me, I saw faces. Dozens of them pressed against the glass, pale, wet, half-burnt, half-rotted. And over the intercom came a single voice, layered, distorted, choral. "You left us." I screamed. The other passengers turned to look at me like I had lost my mind. When the train started moving again, the faces were gone, but the words followed me all the way home. That night, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Static. Then Daniel's voice. "You always were the careful one, Mara." I froze. "What do you want?" Closure. My throat tightened. You're dead. Then why are you still talking to me? There was a pause. Then faintly, the chorus behind him whispered, You left us. The call ended, and my apartment went dark. I tried to sleep in the living room with the lights on. At 2:29 a.m., the air turned heavy, humid, and cold all at once. The smell of burnt rubber filled the room. I turned, gagging, and saw smoke seeping from under my bedroom door. When I opened it, the walls were blackened, the ceiling dripping with condensation, and standing in the center of the room was David Burke. Skin blistered, eyes hollow, smiling faintly through melted lips. Missed you at the bridge, he rasped. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug. My head hit the wall. When I opened my eyes again, he was gone. But my phone was ringing. Daniel. I want you to come back, he said. His tone was calm, almost tender. They're all waiting. Jenny, Chris, David, and me. I can't, I whispered. You already did. The line filled with that same layered whisper, like dozens of voices speaking in unison. You left us. You left us. You left us. Then came the sound of water rushing fast and furious, as if the river itself was trying to climb out of the phone. I threw the phone against the wall. It didn't break. It started ringing again. By morning, the city outside my window looked the same. People going to work, kids laughing, cars honking. But inside, everything had changed. The walls dripped with moisture. The air smelled of smoke and silt. And somewhere in the building, a phone kept ringing. Constant, endless, echoing through the vents. I left for work early just to escape it. But the archive room wasn't any better. Every time I opened a file drawer, the documents inside were damp, pages smudged with muddy fingerprints. When I checked the surveillance monitor, I saw movement in the stacks, a shadow walking between the shelves. I ran there. Empty. But when I came back, my screen showed my own face staring into the camera, only my eyes were wrong. They were his. That night I drove to Winton. I told myself it was to prove they weren't real, to end it. The road to the railway bridge hadn't changed much. The trees leaned in over the asphalt like eavesdropping ghosts. The bridge itself was still there, rusted, thin, and trembling under the wind. He was waiting at the center. Daniel. He looked almost the same, except for the skin. It was too pale, stretched too tight. His clothes were still wet. His smile, too wide. You happened, he said softly. My knees almost buckled. Daniel, please. He turned slightly, gesturing behind him. They were all there. Jenny, hair still dripping. Chris, face caved from the crash. David, smoke curling off his skin. Others I barely remembered, each one frozen in that same grotesque smile. They began to hum, low, rhythmic, like the sound of the river below. I tried to back away, but the wood creaked. The sound grew louder, overlapping, 100 whispering throats. Why did you leave me? Daniel asked. I was scared. So was I. He took a step closer. The air around him shimmered with humidity. Jump, he said. It's your turn. The chorus swelled, not voices now, but screams layered over laughter. Jump, join, follow. I ran. The bridge shook beneath me, the wood splintered. Hands, cold, wet, burned, broken, reached up from between the planks, grabbing at my ankles. I kicked, screamed, stumbled. The end of the bridge was only a few steps away. Then Daniel was in front of me, his face inches from mine. "Too late," he whispered. He grabbed my wrist. His skin burned cold. The world tilted. The chorus screamed as one. And then, silence. I woke up in my apartment, drenched, shivering, the clock blinking 3:07 a.m. My phone was on the table, screen cracked, ringing softly. I answered. "Welcome home," Daniel said. That was 3 days ago.
You never really escape your past. You just learn to walk quietly enough that it stops following you. For a while. I thought I'd done that. Baltimore was supposed to be my clean slate, a city where no one knew the name Lake Afton. It's been 20 years since that summer, since Ethan, since I stood on that algae-green water's edge, heart pounding, hands trembling, watching bubbles rise from below. And then, nothing. The silence that followed was the kind that never leaves you. It fills every quiet moment of your life afterward, like water in your lungs. But I learned to live around it. I became Anna Pierce, the nurse who's always on time, always smiling, always helpful. I memorized every hallway of St. Catherine's Hospital so I'd never have to stop moving, because when I stopped, I could still hear him. The faint sound of someone calling my name from under the surface. It started with a message. I was in the break room, scrolling through my phone on my lunch hour. Spam texts, appointment reminders, one from my mom asking if I was eating properly. Then, "Do you still bite your nails when you're nervous?" No name. Unknown number. My throat tightened. I hadn't told anyone about that habit in years. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You already know." I dropped the phone. My heart was racing so fast I thought I'd faint. I stared at the screen, waiting for another message. "Lake Afton misses you, Anna." My lunch break ended, but I didn't move. I couldn't. It was like my body had turned to ice. I tried to reason with myself later that night. It had to be a prank. Someone from my old high school, maybe, trying to mess with me. But that didn't explain the photo that arrived at 2:17 a.m. It was of the St. Catherine's Hospital parking lot. My car. Time-stamped 5 minutes after I'd left work. My breath hitched. I checked the locks. Everything was shut tight. I told myself it couldn't be him. Ethan was dead. I saw him drown. But the air smelled faintly of pond water, that same murky metallic smell that clung to my clothes all those years ago. The next morning, I asked my neighbor Taylor if she'd noticed anyone strange hanging around. She raised an eyebrow. "You okay, Anna? You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine. Just weird messages. Probably nothing." Taylor shrugged. "You want me to check your locks again tonight?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks." That evening, she came by, checked every window and door, and left me with a warm hug and a small flashlight. I slept with it under my pillow like a child hiding from monsters. But around 3 a.m., the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. The voice on the other end was soft, wet, broken. "Why'd you let me go, Anna?" The line crackled with static. "Ethan? You sound the same." Then the call ended. By morning, I convinced myself it hadn't happened. Sleep paralysis, maybe. Hallucination from exhaustion.
But when I went to pour my coffee, the mug slipped from my hands. My kitchen floor was wet, a puddle stretching from the door to the sink. The footprints leading away from it were bare. Later that day, my mother called. "Anna, who's that man who keeps calling the house?" I froze. "What man?" "He said his name's Ethan. He's been asking for you. His voice is strange. I told him you moved away years ago." I hung up without saying goodbye. By the third night, my apartment reeked of algae. The wallpaper near the bathroom was damp to the touch. I kept hearing small splashes, like something dripping onto tile. I tried to drown it out with music, but the rhythm turned into the sound of gurgling water. At 4 a.m., I saw him. He was standing in the hallway, soaked, clothes clinging to his skin. His head tilted slightly, his mouth curved into a smile that didn't belong to anything living. "Hey, Anna," he said. His voice skipped like a damaged recording. "You left me." I stumbled back, whispering, "You're not real." He laughed, and water spilled from his mouth. "Does this feel real?" I blinked, and he was gone. But the floor where he stood was wet. I went to the police the next morning. Detective Harper listened politely as I explained the messages, the photos, the calls. When I told him the man's name, his expression shifted. Not disbelief, but something else. "Lake Afton?" he asked quietly. "That's Kansas, right?" I nodded. He tapped his pen. "Miss Pierce, is it possible you're experiencing some kind of grief hallucination?" "I'm not grieving," I snapped. "I'm being stalked." But his tone softened. "Sometimes trauma resurfaces under stress." I left before he could finish the word therapy. That night, the smell of algae returned. Heavier, thicker. It clung to my clothes, my hair, my pillow. When I stepped into the shower, the water pressure faltered. For a second, the water turned ice cold, then warm again. When I looked down, it wasn't water running from the faucet anymore. It was green. I screamed, stumbled out, and slipped on something slimy. My bathtub was coated in a thin layer of pond scum. And there, written across the fogged-up mirror, in dripping letters, were the words, "Come back to the lake." I packed a bag that night. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to end it. Maybe I thought confronting it would make it stop. The drive to Lake Afton took 7 hours. By the time I got there, it was near midnight. The lake was just as I remembered, still, green, and utterly silent. The air buzzed with mosquitoes. The moon reflected faintly on the water's surface, turning the ripples into something almost metallic. I walked to the dock. My sneakers sunk slightly into the damp wood. "Ethan," I whispered, "if you're here, please, let me go." The water bubbled. Something pale broke the surface. First fingers, then hands, then a head. Ethan's face, bloated and gray-green, hair clinging to his skull like wet weeds. His eyes rolled towards me, and that same warped smile split his face. "You left me," he gurgled. "You watched me drown." I shook my head violently. "I tried to help. I went for—" "Help?" His voice cracked, repeating the word, "You ran." He reached for me. The water dragged at his limbs, but he moved with terrifying strength. I stepped back. "Don't touch me!" "Confess," he whispered. The dock shook. The air smelled of iron and rot. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. "I was scared," I screamed. "I didn't know what to do." He smiled. "That's all I wanted." Then he lunged. Cold hands wrapped around my wrists and pulled
The lake swallowed me whole. The water filled my nose, my mouth, my eyes. I kicked and screamed, but the pressure was crushing. His face was inches from mine, his eyes unblinking. "You could have saved me," he hissed, bubbles spilling from his mouth. "Now it's your turn." When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. White ceiling, steady beeping. The nurse told me I'd been found unconscious by the lake. Hypothermic, but alive. "Lucky someone saw your car," she said with a smile. "You're safe now." Safe. She walked away, but as she did, I noticed wet footprints on the tile, leading out of my room. I sat up. My hands were shaking. My skin still smelled of pond water. When I looked into the metal tray beside my bed, the reflection rippled like the surface of a lake. And in it, behind my shoulder, I saw him, Ethan, smiling. They let me out a week later. I told everyone it was exhaustion, dehydration, maybe a breakdown. But the truth followed me home. My patients complain about a musty, swampy smell whenever I'm in the room. Some of them say their mirrors ripple when I walk past, and when I wash my hands, the water sometimes turns green for just a second. The last time I looked into the mirror, I didn't see my reflection. I saw his smile, his eyes, his voice whispering from the glass. "You're finally under, Anna. We're together again." Sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still feel his hand.
I used to think I understood risk. Numbers, probability, cost versus reward. My whole career was built on predicting danger before it arrived. But you can't quantify guilt. You can't measure how long it takes for fire to find its way back to you. My name is Julian Reed. I'm 30 now, financial analyst. Cold, reliable, controlled. That's how people describe me. They don't know the vault. They don't know Leo. We were 15 when it happened. 2 kids breaking into our high school to vandalize the principal's office. A stupid teenage rebellion, fueled by cheap beer and bad judgment. Leo was the smart one. Quiet, curious. The kind of boy who still believed everything could be fixed with logic. He brought matches. I brought courage I didn't really have. We wanted to burn old detention slips, make a point. But paper burns fast, faster than you think. When the fire spread, panic took over. Smoke rolled down the hallway, thick and black. We ran for the records room, the oldest part of the building, where the walls still smelled of dust and varnish. That's when we found the vault. It was hidden behind a bookcase, a heavy steel door with a broken lock. We crawled inside, thinking it would keep the smoke out. It did, for a while. Then the air began to thin. Leo started coughing, clawing at the door. "Julian," he gasped, "we have to get out." I pushed, but the door was jammed. And then, somehow, it moved. Just enough for me to squeeze through. I slipped out. I don't remember deciding to close it. I just remember the weight of the handle in my hand, the sound of metal sealing shut, and Leo's voice, muffled, frantic, echoing behind it. I told myself I'd get help, but I didn't. I ran. By the time firefighters arrived, the building was engulfed. They found nothing but ash. That was 15 years ago. I never told anyone what really happened. Until the countdown started. It appeared one Monday morning, a small digital clock in the corner of my computer screen, blinking red. 15:00. No app, no program. I couldn't close it. Every 15 minutes, it reset. And every reset came with a message. Time for the final check, Jay. I thought it was malware. I even paid a tech specialist to look. He found nothing. Weird artifact, he said, probably harmless. But that night, I smelled smoke. At first it was faint, like a burnt match after it's blown out. Then stronger, until it filled the apartment. I tore through every room looking for a source, the oven, the sockets, the vents. Nothing. But my files were different. When I opened my cabinet, the edges of my papers were scorched. My pay stubs, my client reports, all singed. When I touched them, my fingertips came away black. I washed my hands. The smell of ash wouldn't leave. By day 3, the heat started. My apartment grew warmer every hour. I turned off the radiator, opened windows. Still, the air shimmered. My skin itched. My pulse raced. That's when I saw him. In the mirror above the sink. Faint, blurred. Like smoke trapped in glass. Leo. His outline rippled, features smudged like charcoal. But I recognized him instantly. The slouch, the shape of his jaw, the dark eyes. He was staring right at me, and his mouth moved, though no sound came out. When I blinked, he was gone. The next morning, my computer turned itself on. The countdown was gone. In its place was a single line of text. 15 minutes left in the vault. The clock resumed, ticking down. 14:59, 14:58. I yanked the power cable from the wall. The screen stayed on. The smell of burning paper filled the room. When the timer hit 0, I heard it. A metallic clank, exactly like the vault door closing. I started dreaming about the fire again. In the dreams, I'm inside the vault. But I'm not me, I'm Leo. The walls glow red, the air tastes like pennies and smoke, my lungs burn. I scream for help, but the door doesn't move. And outside, in the dream, I see my younger self watching through the window, expressionless, silent. When I wake, my sheets are damp with sweat. The air smells like sulfur. The apartment kept heating. By Wednesday, the thermostat was at 108 degrees Fahrenheit. I couldn't breathe. Every breath seared my throat. My walls radiated warmth. The floorboards pulsed like coals. When I opened the refrigerator, the food inside was steaming. I ran into the hall. My neighbors looked at me like I was crazy. "It's freezing in here," one said. But I could still feel the heat crawling over my skin. And in every reflective surface, metal, glass, even the window, I saw thin threads of smoke swirling, shaping themselves into a human form. I knew what I had to do, or maybe the heat told me. That night, I drove back to my old high school. The building had been rebuilt years ago, modern and sterile. But they'd kept one thing, the vault, the same one. A relic of history, now part of a museum wing. The exhibition plaque read, "Remnants of the 2008 library fire, preserved as a memorial." The vault door was open. The inside was empty, polished concrete, clean. I stepped inside. The air grew heavier immediately, hot, damp, thick with the faint tang of burnt glue and dust. Behind me, the door creaked. The lights flickered, and then I heard it, the countdown. 15:00, 14:59, 14:58. The same voice as before, whispering between ticks. "You left me here." I turned toward the doorway. Leo was there, or what was left of him. His eyes glowed faint orange, like embers. His body was blackened at the edges, smoke coiling from his shoulders. He smiled, calm, forgiving, horrifying. I kept waiting. He rasped. It got so hot. I'm sorry, I whispered. He stepped closer. No, Julian, you were smart. You sealed the deal. The clock hit 0. The vault door swung shut behind me. I screamed, pounded the steel, but it didn't move. The air thickened, shimmering with heat. Leo's laughter echoed, dry, crackling, blending with the sound of fire. Now it's your turn, he said. I woke to silence. The vault door was open again. The air was cool. For a moment, I thought I'd survived. Then I noticed the walls. They weren't concrete anymore. They were black. Soot covered everything. The ceiling, the floor, even my hands. And on the far wall, written in ash, "Reset complete." They found my car in the school parking lot the next morning, engine running, driver's seat empty. The security footage shows me entering the exhibition at 11:42 p.m. I never come out. The cameras fog over at midnight. When the smoke clears, there's no one inside, just a faint haze and a small pile of ash near the back wall. People say fire cleanses, that it purifies. But the truth is, fire remembers, and somewhere in that vault, beneath the layers of soot and silence, Leo is still counting. 15 minutes, over and over, until I answer again.
There's something about the sound of rusted metal that makes my stomach turn. The creak, the drag, the faint shriek of age. It's too familiar. It sounds just like the night Pete Olson fell. My name is Audrey Shaw, 32, designer, successful, polished. I built my life on control, clean lines, symmetry, and surfaces that never reflect too much. But lately, I can't escape the spinning. It's everywhere, in my dreams, in my head, in the faint squeal of the ceiling fan when I try to sleep, and it always starts the same way, with a carnival. When I was 17, Pete was my best friend. He was quiet, awkward, the kind of boy who blushed when you looked at him too long. He followed me everywhere, carried my sketchbooks, helped me with projects, laughed at my jokes, even when they weren't funny. That summer, the traveling carnival came to town. Pete asked me to go, and because I was a selfish girl who liked the way he looked at me, I said yes. We rode the Ferris wheel, the old, creaky one that looked like it belonged in a black and white photograph. At the top, Pete tried to tell me he loved me. I panicked. I saw a loose bolt near the base of our seat, just a little piece of rusted metal, and in some stupid, impulsive moment, I kicked it loose to scare him. A joke. A harmless scare. Only the carriage shifted. The whole thing tilted. Pete reached out to steady himself and slipped. I remember his hand brushing mine, fingers slipping through my grasp, the scream swallowed by the music below. They called it an accident. The old Ferris wheel was dismantled the next week. I didn't go to the funeral. 15 years later, I started getting packages. The first one arrived on a Tuesday, a small box, no return address. Inside was a single metal bolt, old, rusted, ice cold. I threw it away. The next morning, there were 2 bolts, then 3, then 5, lined neatly on my kitchen counter, each one colder than the last. At first I thought it was a prank, some morbid admirer or internet stalker, but then came the sound, a faint, rhythmic squeak like the turning of a massive wheel. It followed me everywhere, to work, to bed, into dreams that ended with the same image, Pete falling over and over against a sky that never stopped spinning. Then came the vertigo. At first it was just dizziness. Then the world itself began to tilt. When I walked down hallways, the floor seemed to bend. The air hummed. One night, I woke up with the room spinning so violently I crawled to the bathroom and vomited. When I looked up, the mirror above the sink was fogged, and written in the condensation were 2 words, "My turn." The next day, every mirror in my apartment was gone. Not broken, just missing. The maintenance man swore he didn't touch them, but I found one, a small shard wedged in my shoe closet. When I looked into it, Pete's face stared back. Not the boy I remembered, but pale, wide-eyed, his limbs twisted mid-fall, his mouth open in silent scream. I dropped the shard. The squeaking sound grew louder. By Friday, I couldn't stand without holding on to the wall. The air in my apartment spun. The furniture started to shift, literally rotating. When I left the room, the bolts kept coming, hundreds now, piled by my door, my desk, my bed. Every time I touched one, I saw flashes. The Ferris wheel lights flickering against Pete's terrified face, the feel of his hand slipping from mine, the hollow sound of impact that I never truly heard but always imagined. I stopped leaving my apartment. That night my phone buzzed. A video. At first just darkness. Then the faint creak of metal. When the screen brightened, I saw the Ferris wheel. My Ferris wheel, rebuilt in a small park somewhere. The camera panned upward, showing one empty carriage swinging in the wind. Then the voice. "Let's finish the ride, Audrey." It was warped, stuttering, but unmistakable. Pete. I drove until sunrise. I didn't even think, just followed instinct. And there it was. A new carnival on the edge of the city. Bright lights, music, laughter, and in the center, towering above it all, the Ferris wheel. Modern, clean, polished, but I knew it was the same one. I could feel it. I bought a ticket. The operator didn't look at me, didn't speak, just handed me into a carriage. Carriage 13. As it rose, the world below blurred into a whirl of lights and motion. My breath came shallow. Halfway up, the air changed. The metal creaked. The wheel slowed, then stopped. The carriage began to sway. Across from me sat Pete. He looked exactly as he had been in the mirror, frozen mid-fall, limbs stiff, water in his eyes that never blinked. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. We never finished the ride. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. He reached into his hand and held up a rusted bolt, the same one I'd kicked loose 15 years ago. He smiled faintly. This belonged to us. I pressed myself against the back of the seat. "Please, Pete, I didn't mean—" He interrupted, voice colder. "You did." The wheel groaned, turning again. The carriage jerked, swinging violently. "I fell for you once. Now you fall for me."
The bolt in his hand began to twist, sinking into the glass of the carriage window, carving lines that glowed faintly red. The reflection in the glass changed. It wasn't me sitting there anymore. It was him, screaming, falling, endlessly tumbling through sky. I tried to move, to open the door, to shout for help, but my body was frozen. Pete leaned forward until his forehead almost touched mine and whispered, "You always liked symmetry, so I made us even." He pushed the bolt into the glass again. It sunk through and the reflection stayed, not following me, not mirroring, stuck, trapped in the act of falling. Pete smiled. "There. Now we both get to ride forever." The Ferris wheel started turning faster. The wind howled through the metal beams. Pete stood, or floated, outside the carriage now, his body moving in perfect sync with the spinning wheel. The world tilted, the lights streaked, my stomach dropped. Then everything stopped. I woke up in a hospital. A doctor said I'd been found catatonic in the Ferris wheel carriage, heart rate erratic, eyes open, unresponsive. He said they couldn't explain the metal fragments embedded in the skin of my palms. I didn't answer, because when he held up a mirror to check my pupils, I saw my reflection upside down, spinning. Behind me, faint and smiling, Pete whispered, "Round and round, Audrey. We're almost there." Now I avoid elevators, fans, clocks, anything that moves in circles. But sometimes I still hear it, that soft, metallic squeak. And when I close my eyes, everything tilts again. The bolts roll off my desk one by one, and I can feel the carriage sway, waiting for me to look down.
They say memory fades over time. They don't tell you what happens when it doesn't, when it stays sharp, bright, and merciless as the flash of a camera. My name is David Evans. People call me Dave, maritime lawyer, steady, factual, unshakable. But every time I hear a foghorn, my hands still tremble, because the ocean remembers. And so does she, Sarah Miller. We were colleagues once, friends, maybe something more if I'd ever been brave enough to admit it. She was all instinct and fire. I was logic and caution, oil and water. That day at the lighthouse, the day everything ended, she'd found something she shouldn't have. Proof that I'd bent maritime law for a client, covered up negligence that killed a man. She said she couldn't keep quiet. I said she didn't understand. We argued for hours, voices rising above the crash of waves. She called me a coward. I told her she was hysterical. She climbed the stone railing of the lighthouse, rain slick on her hands, shouting that she'd expose me. And I, cold, exhausted, angry, said the words I can never take back. Go ahead. She did. The fall was silent. Only the wind made a sound. I took a single photograph, her hand frozen against the sky, to make it look like an accident. Then I deleted the others. The police called it a tragedy. I called it survival. But guilt is just another kind of tide. It always comes back. 15 years later, it started with a picture. My phone buzzed one night around midnight. Unknown number. No message. Just an image.
a blurry photograph of a hand against a stormy sky. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. But the next morning, it was back, multiplied. Every photo in my camera roll replaced with that same blurred image, even the ones I'd never taken. The sound came next. At first, faint, the distant moan of a foghorn, echoing through my apartment, though I lived miles inland. Then stronger, closer. The air grew damp, heavy with salt. My clothes smelled like sea spray. My windows wept condensation even on dry nights. And sometimes, when I turned off the lights, I could see the faint reflection of a wave rolling across the glass. I told myself I was overworked, but the world around me began to warp. Legal documents in my office appeared water-damaged. Ink bled across the pages like tide marks. My colleagues complained about the smell of brine when I entered a room. And in the silence of my flat, I could hear it. The soft slap of waves against rocks. Even the photographs on my wall began to change. Each frame slowly blurred, replaced with that same hand frozen mid-fall. The first time I saw her, it was raining. I'd stayed late in the office, lights dimmed, city quiet. When I looked out the window, the street below shimmered with water, though it hadn't rained all day. A figure stood on the far corner, drenched, unmoving. She was looking up, at me. Even from 6 stories up, I knew that face. Sarah. Her skin was pale, blue-tinted, hair plastered against her skull. She tilted her head, and though her mouth didn't move, I heard her voice inside me. "You told me to go." The lights flickered. I blinked, and she was gone. But when I turned back to my desk, my laptop screen had changed. The background image, the firm logo, was gone. In its place, the photograph. Her hand, mid-fall. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back on that lighthouse. Rain on my skin, camera in my hand, her voice swallowed by the sea. Then one night, the dream changed. I wasn't looking down anymore. I was falling with her. The air rushed past. The rocks below gleamed wet and sharp. She turned toward me, eyes open, smiling. "Your turn," she whispered. I woke gasping, sheets soaked in salt water. Actual salt water. The following morning, my assistant found me staring at my computer screen. Every open document, every contract, every brief had been overwritten with the same phrase, repeated endlessly. She fell, it was the picture. Over and over, thousands of times. When I tried to close the file, my reflection in the monitor rippled and smiled back. By the weekend, the haunting moved beyond sound or sight. The floorboards warped, swollen with invisible moisture. Every step left a damp footprint. I'd wake to find puddles near the window, though it never rained. And sometimes, when I turned off the lights, I could see her reflection follow mine, half a second too late. Always falling, always reaching. Then came the final message. A photo appeared on my phone. High resolution, perfectly clear. The lighthouse, lit by lightning. And her, standing on the air just beyond the railing, above the crashing waves. Below, a caption. "Let's finish what you started." I drove through the night. Rain lashed the windshield, fog thick enough to choke on. By the time I reached the cliffs, the old lighthouse stood like a black tooth against the sea. It was supposed to have been decommissioned years ago, but the light was on, pulsing, calling. Inside, the spiral stairs groaned under my weight. Water dripped from the ceiling, salt stinging my lips. The air hummed, low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. At the top, the glass was shattered. Wind screamed through the opening, carrying mist and thunder. And there she was, Sarah, standing just beyond the railing, barefoot, drenched. The wind sea tore through her hair, but she didn't move. "Hello, Dave," she said softly. "Brought your camera?" I shook my head. "I'm sorry. You have no idea how sorry I am." She smiled faintly. "I think I do." In her hand was a photograph, the one I had taken. The blur, the hand, the sky. Only now the photo was clear. Her whole face visible, terrified, betrayed, and behind her, at the edge of the frame, me, watching. "You remember what you said?" she asked. I closed my eyes. "Go ahead." She nodded. "Good." The floor vibrated beneath us. The waves below crashed louder, the air thick with salt and ozone. "Then you should see how it feels." She pressed the photograph against my chest. For an instant, the world exploded in white light, blinding, freezing, burning all at once. When I could see again, she was gone. So was the railing, and I was falling. When I woke, I was on the rocks below, alive, barely. The rescue team said they found me at dawn, broken ribs, a fractured leg. I told them I slipped, that I came to say goodbye. They believed me. Everyone always does. But I know what happened. Because when I looked down at the wet sand beside me, a photograph was half buried there, the edges fluttering in the wind. It was the picture, the same one. Only this time, I wasn't behind the lens. I was in it, falling. Weeks later, when they brought me my personal effects, my phone had one new image in the gallery. No timestamp, no file info, just the blurred outline of a hand against the sky. And if you zoom in close enough, you can see the reflection of a man in the glass, wide-eyed, mouth open, caught in the moment he realizes the fall never ends. Now the foghorns sound louder every night. My documents still reek of salt, and when I close my eyes, I hear her whisper, soft, patient, and eternal. She fell. It was the picture.
Writers talk about ghosts in stories. They never mention what happens when the story itself becomes the ghost. My name is Victoria Quinn, though everyone calls me Tori. I used to believe words could save me, that if I wrote them fast enough, beautifully enough, I could outrun the truth buried between the lines. But I was wrong, because somewhere inside a forgotten attic, under dust and rot, my words, his words, are still alive. It started back in college. I was 20, desperate, broke, and terrified of being ordinary. And then there was Simon Asher. He was brilliant, the kind of writer professors quoted, the kind of friend who made you feel stupid for breathing too loud in his presence. We competed for the same fellowship. The day he finished his masterpiece, he read me a few pages. It was perfect, bold, alive, full of pain that felt real. And that's what ruined him. He left the script in his dorm room that night. I took it. Told myself it was just to read, just to learn. But when I finished, I couldn't stop. I hid it. Locked it in an old trunk in the attic of our student house, beneath blankets, notebooks, and a lifetime of dust. The next morning, Simon was dead. They said it was suicide. I knew better. I built a career on what came next. I found inspiration, rewrote, refined. The script that won me the fellowship, the one that made my name, wasn't mine. It was Simon's story wearing my skin. And for years, it worked. Until the typewriter started again. It began one night last month. I was working late, editing my new screenplay. The apartment was silent. No wind, no pipes, no neighbors awake. Then I heard it. Clack, clack, clack. A typewriter, slow, steady, coming from the next room. I didn't even own one. When I walked into my office, the sound stopped. On the desk sat a single sheet of paper, perfectly centered. 6 words, typed clean and sharp. Did you think I'd stop writing? I froze. The paper smelled faintly of dust and stale air, the kind of smell you only find in attics. I tore it up and threw it away. But the next morning, there were more. Pages scattered across the floor, the bed, the counter. Each one with the same typeface, the same yellowed paper. Some were lines from Simon's original script. Others were new. One simply said, "You buried me in words." By the end of the week, the apartment had changed. The air grew heavy, thick, hot. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, like breathing paper. And that smell, old, trapped, unventilated, never left. Every time I touched my keyboard, it stuck. Letters jammed. The screen froze. When it blinked back to life, the words on my monitor weren't mine. Scene 1. Tori confesses. I slammed the laptop shut. That night, I dreamed of the attic, of the trunk, of Simon standing beside it, his fingers black with ink, whispering, "You can't edit the truth." When I woke, the sheets were covered in typewritten pages, each one had the same thing. Come finish the story. I drove to the old student house the next day. It hadn't changed much. Ivy strangling the bricks, windows fogged with grime. The landlord gave me the key after I lied about researching nostalgia. The attic stairs groaned under my weight. It smelled exactly as I remembered. Dust, mildew, and something sweet and rotting. The trunk was still there, old, heavy, the brass latch black with age. When I opened it, the air rushed out, dry, stale, suffocating. And inside were scraps of Simon's old notes, warped notebooks, and at the bottom, the script, or what was left of it. The pages were fused together, dark, brittle, discolored, and between them, strands of hair. I stepped back, gagging. Something inside the trunk shifted, and then I saw him. He was sitting in the far corner of the attic, half hidden in shadow. Thin, hollow-eyed, fingers black with ink. His body wasn't flesh anymore. It looked written. Letters crawled faintly across his skin like words struggling to erase themselves. "Tori," he rasped, "you rewrote me." I couldn't speak. He stood, each movement jerky like paper folding against itself. He said, "I spent years trying to end it. You just kept typing." I shook my head. "Simon, please." He whispered, "You made me a story. Now you'll live in one." He reached out. His fingers left ink stains on my arm that burned cold. I ran. The attic door slammed shut behind me. I don't remember getting home, but when I did, every wall was covered in paper, hundreds of pages, nailed, glued, hanging in uneven layers. Each one filled with lines from Simon's script. And in the center of it all, my own handwriting, my signature scrawled at the bottom of every page.
The typewriter sat in the middle of the room, waiting. It wasn't plugged in. It didn't need to be. The carriage moved by itself. Clack, clack, clack. It typed my name. Then it began the next line. Internal attic, night. Tori returns to the trunk. I tried to tear the pages down, but every one I touched cut my fingers open, the paper biting back. Blood smeared across the words, but the script kept rewriting itself, absorbing the red into the ink. That night, I dreamed again. Only this time, I wasn't watching. I was inside the typewriter. Metal pressing against my ribs, ribbon coiling through my throat. Simon stood over me, smiling faintly. He said, "Your turn." The next morning, the typewriter was still, but my laptop screen glowed faintly. A new document had opened, titled Final Draft by Simon Asher. I tried to close it, couldn't. Tried to delete it. It reappeared. The cursor blinked twice, then words began appearing on their own. Tori rewrites herself into oblivion. My hands started moving, not my will, not my mind, typing faster and faster. Sentences poured out, sharp, perfect, familiar. It was his voice, coming through my fingers. When it finally stopped, there were 120 pages. His masterpiece, my confession. At the bottom, one final line appeared by itself. She finishes the story, and the story finishes her. I don't remember what happened next, only the sound of the typewriter restarting, the room spinning, and the faint taste of ink on my tongue. They found me 3 days later, slumped over the desk, breathing, alive. But the walls. Every surface of my apartment, the ceiling, the floor, the mirrors, was covered in paper. Each page yellowed and typed with the same script. Simon's words. My name nowhere. People call it my greatest work, a masterpiece discovered after a breakdown. They say it's so authentic, it feels alive. And maybe it is, because every night, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint clack of the typewriter starting again. And when I look at my reflection, I don't see myself anymore. I see Simon, smiling, typing, finishing the next line.
There are certain sounds that never fade, like stone shifting under its own weight, or the whisper of earth settling over a coffin. For years, I've tried to forget that sound, but the walls won't let me. I'm Charlotte Bell, architect, planner, problem solver. I design buildings that last, structures that don't collapse under pressure. Funny, isn't it, considering what I buried? His name was Victor Hawthorne, Vic to everyone who loved him. He was bold, clever, a little dangerous, the kind of person who made you believe in chaos. He also trusted me, and I sealed him in alive. We were 20 when it happened, 2 architecture students obsessed with abandoned places. That night we'd snuck into an old church outside Weatherby. It was slated for demolition, condemned after a roof collapse. Vic wanted to see the basement, the part rumored to be a crypt. I remember the smell when we found the stairs. Damp stone, rot, and something older. We'd only been down there 10 minutes when the police showed up outside. Vic panicked. He'd been caught stealing blueprints the week before. "Go," he whispered. "I'll hide." He locked himself in the far corner, behind a slab of fallen masonry. I promised I'd wait, but I didn't. When the flashlights came closer, I used my knowledge of load distribution to push one of the broken beams across the exit, wedging it shut. It would buy me time and bury him. By morning, the church was condemned completely. They never found him. 15 years later, I was head architect on a new housing project. A luxury complex built on the ruins of that same church. The blueprints looked perfect, every line, every angle, precise. Until the emails started. They came from my own address. No subject line, no sender, just attachments. My project drafts, defaced with Latin phrases I didn't recognize, scrawled across the floor plans like vandalism. Clausum est sub lapide. Monet in tenebres. I looked them up. Closed beneath the stone. He remains in darkness. That night, my apartment smelled like old stone and decaying flowers. Lilies, the funeral kind. The air was heavy, pressing down on my chest. I kept waking up gasping, convinced the ceiling was lowering inch by inch. When I turned on the lamp, dust fell from above. Fine gray powder that tasted like mortar. I told myself it was stress, overwork, but the next morning new cracks had appeared along the walls, and when I traced one with my finger, it felt warm. At the office, the drafts kept changing. Every time I opened the file, new lines appeared in the foundation, irregular, deep, branching like veins. One afternoon, I printed the latest version, and there it was. In the center, the sub-level, beneath what used to be the church, a single mark I hadn't drawn. A rectangle, 6 by 2 feet. Perfect dimensions for a grave. The pressure in my apartment worsened. At night, I woke drenched in sweat, lungs aching as though the air had thickened into stone dust. The smell of old masonry seeped from the vents. My ceiling groaned. And then I started seeing him. Vic. Not fully, just hints of him at first. A figure carved out of pale rock, standing in corners where the shadows pooled too deep. Sometimes his eyes were just empty holes. Other times they glowed faintly like candlelight through cracks. He never moved, never spoke, but the walls shifted when he appeared. Subtle tremors, like the building itself was breathing. One evening, I came home to find my entire ceiling lined with fissures, long, jagged lines that spidered across the plaster, dripping fine sand. I stepped closer and heard a voice, soft, muffled. "Getting tight down here, Char." My knees gave out. The ceiling above me bulged slightly, then exhaled a puff of gray dust. I ran into the kitchen, choking. When I turned around, the message was there, scrawled into the grit on the floor. Time to even the walls. The nightmares grew unbearable. I'd wake to the sound of shifting stone and find myself lying flat, unable to move, the weight of invisible rubble pressing against my chest. Some nights I could hear him whispering from inside the walls, a voice low and echoing, as if vibrating through concrete. "You said you'd wait. You sealed it perfectly. You're the only architect who ever made a tomb that worked." The words repeated until I screamed myself awake. On the final night, I stopped fighting. The blueprints on my desk changed again. The cracks on the paper mirrored the cracks in my ceiling. I followed them, line by line, floor by floor, until I reached the coordinates where the old church once stood. It was raining, of course. It always rains before something gives way. The site was half demolished now, a maze of scaffolding and stone. I walked through mud and rubble until I reached the new basement entrance. The air down there was colder than outside, still, heavy, wet. The deeper I went, the more I could hear it, a slow, rhythmic drip,
like water seeping from a grave. At the end of the corridor, I found a door. Old wood, iron hinges, familiar. When I pushed it open, I stepped into a room that shouldn't exist. The old basement, perfectly preserved. The air reeked of limestone and rot. My flashlight beam caught what looked like carvings on the walls, long finger marks embedded in the stone, as if someone had clawed at it from the inside. And in the center of the floor, the slab of masonry I'd once moved. It shifted, breathing dust. I knelt, trembling. "Vic!" A hand emerged, gray, dry, perfectly still. Then the rest of him. His face was carved in shades of marble, cracked and flaking. His mouth barely moved when he spoke. "It's getting tight down here, Char." The ground began to quake. Cracks spread across the ceiling, raining grit and dust. "You can fix it," he whispered. "You always fix everything." The walls started closing in, literally, pressing. I stumbled backward, but his hand caught mine. It felt like stone, cold, solid, impossible to break free. "Even the walls," he said again. Then he pulled. I woke to darkness. No air, no space, just weight, earth pressing down, stone grinding above. I screamed, but the sound died against the walls. My fingertips brushed concrete, smooth, precise. My own work. And beneath the panic, one final realization sunk in. I hadn't buried Vic alone. I'd been building our tomb from the start. Days later, construction resumed. The workers said they found the basement collapsed overnight. No sign of a cave-in, just a perfectly sealed foundation. No cracks, no openings. And when they drilled to inspect it, the sound that came from beneath was not stone breaking. It was breathing. If you ever walk by the new apartments on Weatherby Street, you'll notice how quiet it gets near the center of the courtyard. No echo, no wind, no birds, only pressure, like the earth holding its breath. Because down there, under all that polished steel and perfect geometry, two architects are still arguing about the walls. And one of them won't stop whispering. "It's getting tight down here, Char."